Every October, millions of Americans rake leaves into piles, haul branches to the curb, and light bonfires that destroy what could become a century of free water and fertilizer. We call it yard waste. We pay to have it removed. Yet, in the Austrian Alps, at 1,500 meters elevation, where winter temperatures plunged to minus 25 degrees Celsius and snow blankets the ground for half the year, one farmer buried that same waste and grew lemons. Not in a greenhouse, not with irrigation, just lemons hanging heavy on trees planted in mounds of rotting wood, fruiting through winter while his neighbors struggled to grow grass. For 20 years, those beds produced harvests that seemed impossible, watering themselves through droughts that emptied wells across the valley. Then the government tried to destroy him. They fined him dozens of times. They threatened to seize his land. They wanted him to stop. And when scientists finally studied what he built, they found something that challenges everything modern agriculture believes. This is the story of the garden that waters itself for 100 years, and why we were taught to forget it. Sepp Holzer never set out to become a rebel. He simply wanted to farm the way the mountains taught him. When he inherited his family's failing 24-hectare farm in 1962, at age 19, neighbors called him completely crazy. The Kreimhof sat on the southern slope of Schwarzenberg Mountain in Salzburg province, a place so brutal that visiting scientist Dr. Berndlock would later call it Austria's Siberia. The farm endures 170 frost days every year, ice days where temperatures never rise above freezing, and winds that strip topsoil from exposed slopes. His father had followed every regulation, planted the government-approved spruce monocultures, pruned his fruit trees according to the manual, and died, leaving the farm buried in debt. Holzer looked at those rules and saw only failure. He looked at the forest and saw abundance that no one was watering, no one was fertilizing, no one was managing. So he stopped following the rules and started following the forest. He dug massive ponds without permission, using excavator vibration to seal clay bottoms naturally instead of expensive liners. He refused to prune his fruit trees, discovering that unpruned branches bend under snow loads, while pruned ones snap like kindling. He built terraces from buried logs and planted citrus where regulations demanded spruce. The Austrian Agricultural Board lost their minds. They fined him for not pruning, they fined him for building ponds, they ordered him to plant spruce monocultures. When he refused, explaining that spruce needle litter acidifies the soil and shallow roots do not consolidate steep slopes, they fined him again. "Why should I plant spruce?" he asked them, "when heat and drought make them susceptible to bark beetles, and my kiwis are thriving?" They had no answer except more fines. By the late 1980s, Sepp Holzer was known throughout Austria as the most fined farmer in the country. Thousands of shillings, piled into tens of thousands, then converted to euros as the currency changed. But the fines kept coming. He got caught up in a web of litigation and lawsuits. Lutsch wrote, remaining steadfast under great financial and mental strain. In 1986, after heavy rains, authorities accused him of creating illegal water retention that would cause floods. Holzer paid the penalty, then appealed, arguing his terraces prevented the disasters they feared. In 1989, the pressure peaked. The Agricultural Board threatened to seize his farm entirely. Holzer's response was simple. He invited them to see his yields. "Walk the terraces," he told them. "Taste the lemons that never saw a greenhouse. Measure the harvests." His farm was producing 10 times more food per hectare than any neighbor following the regulations. 10 times without irrigation, without fertilizer, without the chemicals that filled government warehouses. The inspectors came with their clipboards and cameras. They walked past kiwi vines climbing alongside spruce trees, fuzzy fruit swelling under cold mountain skies. They photographed grapes ripening on slopes where neighbors grew only grass. They watched Holzer pull radishes from snow-covered beds in December, the soil beneath still warm from decomposing wood. They had no category for what they were seeing. By 1992, after yet another fine for expanding a pond, something shifted. "My yields silenced them," Holzer wrote. The evidence was undeniable. Citrus trees bending under the weight of fruit, vegetables thriving in Austria's Siberia. The fines never stopped completely, but the threats of seizure ended. In 1995, Professor Locke and students from Vienna's Boku University officially certified Crematorhof as the most consistent example of permaculture worldwide. Holzer had won by refusing to lose. His persistence turned every penalty into proof. In 2002, he published Daragar Rebel, The Rebel Farmer, and it became a bestseller. Today, he consults around the world, from Siberia to California to Scotland to Detroit, teaching what the Austrian government tried to bury. And at the heart of every technique he teaches is a single, overlooked truth. Rotting wood is not waste. It is infrastructure. But here is what the government never understood, and what makes this story so critical today. Holzer was not relying on hope or faith or some mystical connection to the land. He was relying on physics, hard, measurable, documented physics that scientists would eventually prove in laboratories and field trials. The water retention alone should have convinced them. A study from Western Kentucky University measured Hugelkultur sites over 3 months and found they contained almost twice as much water as flat control plots. Twice. A full hectare of these mounds can hold 3 to 10 times more water than equivalent flat ground affected by rocky soil. The Goleta Water District in California demonstrated a 40% reduction in irrigation needs compared to traditional raised beds. And practitioners from Oregon to Massachusetts report that after 2 to 3 years, mature beds require 0 supplemental irrigation during normal rainfall. 0. The hose stays coiled in the shed all summer, while neighbors run sprinklers every evening. The mechanism is brutally simple. Rotting wood is a sponge, not a metaphor. A physical sponge, built by nature's architecture. The cell walls of wood, made mostly of lignin and cellulose, form a labyrinth of microscopic pores and tunnels. When wood begins to decay, fungi and bacteria eat away at these cell walls, and the pathways open wider. Water floods in, filling every chamber. Laboratory tests show heavily decomposed pine logs soak up water equal to 5 times their dry weight. 500% moisture content. Oak breaks down slower, but still doubles or triples its mass with absorbed water. This is not speculation. Drive a moisture probe deep into a Hugelkultur mound in the middle of July drought and watch the readings climb to 40 or 60% soil moisture, while the surrounding garden shows 15% and plants wilt in the heat. The buried logs below, swollen with water from the last rain weeks ago, release it slowly upward to roots that would otherwise bake in the sun. But the most rigorous proof comes from Bug Hill Farm in Ashfield, Massachusetts, where researchers conducted a 3-year study funded by a $14,976 USDA grant. They built Hugelkultur beds and traditional control beds side by side and measured everything: plant growth, soil health, nutrient content, costs. After 3 years, the numbers were staggering. Elderberry plants in Hugelkultur beds produced 4.03 stems per plant, with an average height of 24.7 inches. Control beds produced 63 stems per plant, averaging 10.23 inches. That is 147% more stems and 141% taller plants. The soil health index improved by 7.67% in Hugelkultur beds versus 4.67% in traditional beds. This was not a marginal difference. This was not within the margin of error. This was a complete transformation of productivity, measured and documented by scientists, not mystics. And the heat generation extends the miracle even further. As microbes and fungi swarm through the buried logs, breaking down lignin and cellulose, their work is exothermic. Every bite of wood releases heat. Cornell University composting research shows home-scale organic decomposition reaches 104 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Fresh Hugelkultur beds have been measured at 140 degrees initially, then maintaining 85 degrees while surrounding ground soil stays at 70 degrees. That is a 15-degree advantage that extends growing seasons by weeks in cold climates. Seeds germinate earlier in spring. Frost that would kill seedlings on bare ground passes harmlessly over these mounds, buffered by steady warmth rising from below. In Minnesota and Wisconsin, gardeners are planting tomatoes 2 weeks earlier and harvesting squash into November, while neighbors watch their gardens freeze. The nitrogen release works on a timeline that matches plant needs perfectly. Fresh wood has a carbon-to-nitrogen ratio of 400 to 750 to 1. Studies tracking wood decomposition over 15 years show the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio dropping from initial values as high as 829 to 1 down to 75 to 1 at advanced decay, with some species reaching 16 to 1. The nitrogen concentration increases from 0.2% initially to 0.9% at final decay stages. What starts as a nitrogen thief transforms into a nitrogen bank, releasing steady supplies for decades. But you do not have to wait decades. Use a mix of 50% fresh wood and 50% already rotted wood, and you bypass most first-year problems entirely. The rotted wood is past its peak nitrogen demand and comes pre-inoculated with beneficial fungi that jumpstart decomposition in the fresh wood layer. Nitrogen-rich materials between the logs, grass clippings, kitchen scraps, manure, even diluted urine, add a 2 to 4 inch compost layer between the wood core and your planting surface. Plant nitrogen-fixing crops in year 1, beans and peas and clover that actually add nitrogen while growing instead of depleting it. By year 2, the nitrogen competition is largely resolved. By year 3, you enter prime productivity that lasts for decades. This is not a gamble. This is following the science of decomposition to its logical conclusion. And Americans are proving it works in every climate zone from coast to coast. In Rainier, Oregon, the Raincatcher homestead, featured on Homestead Rescue, transformed 5 acres with no fresh water source, using Hugelkultur beds that thrived through Pacific Northwest dry summers. In Marion, Iowa, Feed Iowa First and Wanady Farm partnered with Iowa Big students to build beds that Executive Director Emily Renshaw says will last about 15 years, providing nutrients without fertilizer while storing water at the bottom as climate patterns shift. In Los Angeles, Studio Petra maintains an 11-year-old Hugelkultur bed that has never been irrigated and supports 36 native bee species. Never irrigated in Los Angeles for 11 years. These are not anecdotes from permaculture forums. These are named farms and documented results that anyone can verify. And they answer the question burning in your mind right now. If this works so well, why did we stop doing it? Why did we abandon a technique that creates self-watering, self-fertilizing garden beds that last for decades? The answer is not what you think. It was not debunked. It was not proven dangerous. It was made obsolete by a machine. In the decades after 1920, tractors and combine harvesters rolled onto American farms and demanded a perfectly flat surface. No bumps, no mounds, nothing that could slow a steel wheel or jam a mechanical plow. Efficiency became measured in acres covered per hour, not fertility maintained per decade. A tractor can plant a flat field in minutes, running straight rows without pause. But a tractor cannot navigate a landscape of mounds and terraces and ponds. The old practice of building raised beds from buried wood did not fail. It simply did not fit the new logic of mechanization. Fields were scraped level, brush was burned instead of buried. The landscape was reworked to serve machines, not roots. The promise of speed and scale replaced the patient fertility of rotting wood. What remained was a blank canvas, easy for machines, but hungry for everything those buried logs had once provided for free. Fertilizer, irrigation, pesticides to replace the biological diversity that mounded soil had nurtured. We did not discover a better way, we discovered a faster way. And we are still paying the price. But before you grab a chainsaw and start burying every log in your yard, you need to know the problems that sink beginners. While Hugelkultur works brilliantly when done right, it fails spectacularly when done wrong. The #1 problem mentioned in dozens of comments on the original video is nitrogen depletion. People build beautiful mounds, plant their gardens, and watch in horror as everything turns yellow and stops growing. This is the nitrogen trap, and it is completely preventable if you understand the timeline. Peak nitrogen lockup hits in the first 1 to 3 months after building. The wood-eating microbes are at maximum population, desperately scavenging nitrogen to fuel decomposition. By 40 weeks, 1 full growing season, the situation improves significantly. By 1 to 2 years, the problem resolves entirely. After year 2, the mound flips from nitrogen consumer to nitrogen producer, releasing steady supplies for decades. The fix is simple but non-negotiable. Layer your mound like a lasagna, not like a log pile. Start with your largest, most rotten logs at the bottom. Half of your wood should already be rotted soft enough that you can push your thumb through it. This pre-decomposed wood brings billions of beneficial fungi and bacteria that inoculate the fresh wood and dramatically reduce first-year nitrogen competition. Fill every gap between logs with smaller branches and twigs until no air pockets remain. Every air pocket will become a sinkhole as the wood settles. Then comes the critical nitrogen layer. Thick, generous, non-negotiable grass clippings, kitchen scraps without meat or dairy, manure from chickens, rabbits, horses, or cows, coffee grounds from your local cafe, seaweed if you live near the coast. This nitrogen-rich layer feeds the microbes so they leave your plants alone. Top that with 2 to 4 inches of finished compost, then your regular garden soil, then mulch. The total height will settle by 10 to 40% in the first few years, so build it taller than your target height. Adjust your first-year planting strategy. Avoid heavy nitrogen feeders like corn, broccoli, cabbage, and spinach. They will struggle. Instead, plant nitrogen fixers like beans and peas that actually add nitrogen to the soil through bacteria in their root nodules. Plant squash and potatoes and lettuce and herbs, moderate feeders that tolerate imperfect conditions. Use cover crops like crimson clover and winter peas between plantings. If you see yellowing despite these precautions, the recovery is fast. Side dress blood meal at 1 to 2 pounds per 100 square feet. Spray diluted liquid fish fertilizer on leaves for immediate relief. Interplant more legumes. Mulch with fresh grass clippings. The mound will respond within weeks, and by year 2 you will forget you ever had a problem. Fixing nitrogen depletion is only half the battle. The second you mention buried wood to someone in Florida or Australia, they ask the question that stops most people before they even start. The answer is more complicated than you think. There is a second concern that stopped people in termite and white ant zones from even trying. Multiple Australian viewers asked if buried wood would create a termite highway straight to their house. The honest answer is, it depends on your climate and how you build. In the southeast United States, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, Georgia, and in tropical Australia, especially Queensland and the Northern Territory, termites are a real risk that requires specific countermeasures. Subterranean termites can forage up to 150 feet from their nest, and professional pest control specialists confirm that Hugelkultur creates an increased risk if built carelessly. Never build within 30 feet of any structure. Professional recommendations go as far as 150 feet in high-risk areas. Use partially rotted wood or smaller sticks rather than large, solid logs, which are less attractive for termite nesting. Monitor your beds and your home foundation regularly for mud tubes or activity. Here is the counterintuitive insight that Australian practitioners have discovered. The moist, biologically active environment inside a mature Hugelkultur bed may actually be too competitive for termites. One gardener maintained 85 meters of hugel beds over 3.5 years and reported 0 termite activity. The decomposition was already dominated by bacteria, fungi, and other organisms that termites avoid. The termite risk is highest in fresh beds with large, solid, dry logs. In mature beds teeming with microbial life, that competition may actually provide protection. This does not mean you should build next to your house in Florida. It means the risk is manageable with distance, wood selection, and monitoring. In northern climates with hard winters, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, New England, and the upper Midwest, termite risk is essentially zero. Hard freezes kill subterranean termite colonies. Your biggest pest problem will be slugs in the Pacific Northwest, not termites. The third critical factor is wood selection, because not all wood is created equal, and some wood will actively poison your garden. Never, under any circumstances, use black walnut. The roots, leaves, and wood contain juglone, a natural herbicide that is toxic to tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, potatoes, and dozens of other crops. The effects last 5 to 7 years in soil. Never use cedar. The same aromatic oils that make it rot-resistant and smell wonderful also inhibit beneficial fungi and can take decades to break down. Never use black locust or eucalyptus, which contain allelopathic compounds that suppress other plant growth. Never use treated lumber, painted wood, or anything that has been pressure treated with chemicals. Those toxins leach directly into your soil and your food. The best woods are common hardwoods with moderate decomposition rates. Oak is the gold standard, providing 10 to 20 years of steady nutrient release. Maple and apple are excellent. Alder breaks down faster, giving quicker results. Birch holds moisture beautifully. Poplar and cottonwood have a high exchange rate, meaning they absorb and release moisture rapidly. In the Pacific Northwest, alder and cottonwood are ideal and abundant. In the Southwest desert, dead mesquite and palo verde work, but avoid fresh mesquite, which will sprout. In the Southeast, oak, maple, sweet gum, and hickory excel. In the Midwest, cottonwood from river bottoms, elm, ash, and oak are good, but avoid the extremely common black walnut. In the Northeast and New England, apple from orchard prunings, birch, maple, and beech are perfect. In California, oak and fruit tree prunings are recommended, but never cedar or eucalyptus despite their abundance. Now here is where this gets interesting. Everything I just told you assumes you have a yard, but what the permaculture experts did not expect is that the technique works even when you have almost nothing. And that changes everything for urban gardeners. If you live in an apartment or have only a balcony, you can still use this technique in containers. The minimum viable size is a 5-gallon bucket. Use food-grade buckets marked with recycling codes 1, 2, 4, or 5. Drill 5 to 7 half-inch drainage holes in the bottom. Add a base layer of broken pottery or gravel for drainage. Fill the bottom third with small twigs, rotten log pieces, and wood chips. Fill the middle third with leaves, grass clippings, and coffee grounds for nitrogen. Fill the top third with quality potting mix made from compost, screened topsoil, and perlite for aeration. Plant determinate tomatoes, peppers, bush beans, or herbs. Water thoroughly at planting, then watch your watering needs drop by half compared to standard container gardens. The buried wood acts as a reservoir, even in a bucket, releasing moisture gradually so the surface stays moist longer between waterings. But the technique that solves most problems at once is accelerated decomposition through fungal inoculation. Before you bury your logs, inoculate them with mushroom spawn. Oyster mushrooms work on everything, even conifers, and are nearly impossible to kill. Shiitake works beautifully on hardwoods. Winecap mushrooms are excellent for the wood chip mulch layer on top of your beds. Pre-soak logs for 1 to 2 weeks before burial to jumpstart decomposition and to reduce initial nitrogen demand. Drill holes in the logs, stuff them with mushroom spawn, seal with wax, and then bury. The fungi colonize the wood before bacteria do, breaking down lignin faster and more efficiently. Within months, your logs will be laced with white fungal mycelium networks that shuttle nutrients and water through the mound like a living circulatory system. This single technique can reduce the first-year nitrogen problem by half and accelerate the transition to peak productivity. For desert and arid climates, the technique requires a critical adaptation that most beginners miss. Traditional above-ground Hugelkultur does not work in Arizona, Nevada, or Southern California. The raised mound increases surface area, which increases evaporation and completely counteracts the water retention benefits. The solution is sunken or buried Hugelkultur. Dig trenches or pits and bury the wood below grade so the bed becomes a water collection basin instead of a drying rack. This follows traditional Native American techniques like Zuni waffle gardens. A Wyoming gardener in the high desert, with 11 inches of annual rainfall and sandy soil, dug 3-foot deep trenches, filled them with fired debris wood, and reported they became absolutely the most beautiful and productive parts of the garden with the least water consumption. Below grade, the wood captures and holds every drop of rain that would otherwise run off or evaporate. Above grade in the desert, it bakes. For cold climates, the opposite strategy applies. Build taller mounds, 6 feet or higher, to maximize the decomposition heat advantage. Orient the mound in a south-facing horseshoe shape to trap heat and block northern winds. Plant cool weather crops like lettuce and peas on the north side where they stay cooler. Plant heat lovers like tomatoes and peppers on the south side, where the sun and decomposition heat combine. The decomposition heat warms the soil 2 to 4 weeks earlier than flat ground, giving you a growing season that rivals zones hundreds of miles south. Frost passes harmlessly over the warm mount, while killing plants in traditional beds mere feet away. In Minnesota, gardeners are harvesting tomatoes into late October, while neighbors surrendered to frost in September. Now you need to understand the honest timeline so your expectations match reality. Year 1 will be challenging. The practitioner forums are blunt about this. The first year will suck. You will probably need to water frequently. You might see nitrogen deficiency in some plants despite your best efforts. This is normal. Plant nitrogen fixers and moderate feeders, mulch heavily, be patient. Year 2 to 3, nitrogen demand drops significantly. Watering needs decrease, and the bed begins to self-regulate moisture. This is when most people become believers. Year 3 to 5, you enter prime productivity. The fungal networks are established. The wood is swollen with water from multiple seasons of rain and snow. Watering becomes minimal or unnecessary, depending on rainfall. Year 5 to 10 is maximum productivity. You can grow anything. Some gardeners report going 2 to 3 weeks between waterings, even in summer. The soil is rich, dark, and spongy. Year 10 to 20. The original wood is mostly transformed into premium soil. The bed functions more like a traditional raised bed, but the soil quality is extraordinary. You can harvest this soil for other uses or rebuild the mound with new logs. And this is where the 100-year claim comes in. Because while individual logs decompose over 20 years, the soil you create lasts far longer. The transformed wood becomes humus that remains stable for 50 to 100 years. Build a bed properly, and your great-grandchildren will still be harvesting from soil you created. That is not exaggeration. That is the documented lifespan of stable soil organic matter. And if you are worried about aesthetics or homeowner association rules, there are strategies. Build 2-foot tall beds instead of 6-foot mounds. Frame them with decorative stone, brick, or neat lumber so they look intentional and tidy. Top dress with attractive mulch instead of rough wood chips. Label them as pollinator gardens on paper, which sounds environmental and progressive instead of weird and experimental. Use the gradual approach. Start at 2.5 feet tall, add 1 foot per year. Neighbors will not notice the slow growth. By the time it is 5 feet tall, it will be lush and productive, and they will ask how you grew such amazing tomatoes, not why your beds are so tall. You can work with the system without drawing fire. The numbers backing all of this are not speculative. Western Kentucky University measured twice the water retention. The Goleta Water District demonstrated 40% irrigation reduction. Bug Hill Farm documented 147% more plant growth with scientific rigor. Beds last 8 to 20 years depending on wood species. First-year potato yields hit 20-to-1 ratios, double the typical 10-to-1. The 11-year-old Los Angeles hugel has never been irrigated and supports 36 native bee species. These are not miracles. These are documented outcomes from following the physics of wood decomposition and water retention. But if you think this is just about your backyard tomatoes, you are missing the bigger picture entirely. Because what Sepp Holzer rediscovered is not just a gardening technique. It is the lost infrastructure that fed civilizations for thousands of years. and we are destroying the last evidence of it right now. What Sepp Holzer rediscovered and what Americans are relearning is not new. It is ancient. In 1542, Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana sailed the Amazon River and reported cities with millions of inhabitants, organized agriculture, and infrastructure that rivaled Europe. Later explorers found only jungle. Historians dismissed his accounts as fantasy and exaggeration. Then, in the 20th century, soil scientists discovered terra preta, black earth that was 2,000 years old but still fertile, self-regenerating at roughly 1 centimeter per year. It supported populations of 10 to 20 million people in cities larger than contemporary London. The Kiro people, documented in 2023, still know how it is made. Charcoal and ash we sweep, gather it up, and then throw it where we will plant to turn into beautiful ajepe. When you plant where there is no ajepe, the soil is weak. And today, those archaeological sites with irreplaceable dark earth are being mined for potting soil or bulldozed for development. Hundreds of sites are being destroyed as we speak. We are literally excavating and selling the soil-building wisdom of civilizations that fed millions for centuries. For 5,000 years, Native American women planted corn, beans, and squash together in mounds, each sister supporting the others through complementary root systems, nitrogen fixation, and pest management. This system fed Cahokia, a city of 100,000 people near modern St. Louis that was larger than London in its time. The 1887 Allotment Act forced assimilation and displacement, nearly eradicated Three Sisters agriculture by 1930. Now, universities are funding studies to rediscover what traditional ecological knowledge never forgot. Polyculture intercropping in mounds works better than monocultures on flat ground. We systematically erased indigenous agriculture, then spent billions trying to reinvent it in laboratories. The Green Revolution, from 1940 to 1980, transformed global agriculture and prevented mass famines. Synthetic fertilizers, mechanization, hybrid seeds, and pesticides increased world grain production by 160%. But the trade-offs are now undeniable. 1.7 billion tons of United States topsoil are lost annually. 69 billion are spent on agricultural chemicals every year. Groundwater depletion, soil degradation, and Sepper's farm in Austria's Siberia is still producing 10 times the yield of his neighbors, without any of it. No fertilizer, no irrigation, no pesticides. Just the patient wisdom of buried wood and the microbes that break it down. The future is not found in new chemicals or genetically modified seeds or precision agriculture drones. The future is buried in what we currently call waste. Every autumn branch pile you burn is water and fertilizer you will buy back from a store. Every storm-felled tree you haul to the dump is 20 years of soil fertility you are throwing away. The choice is not romantic or nostalgic. It is practical and urgent. Climate change is making droughts longer, heat waves more intense, and water more expensive. Fertilizer prices are climbing. Food security is threatened by soil depletion and resource scarcity. Every buried log is a hedge against that future. Every mound you build is a small act of resilience that will outlive you. Your garden is not a decoration. It is a legacy. The ground remembers what you give it. Bury wood and it becomes water. Bury wood and it becomes fertilizer. Bury wood and it becomes heat that extends your growing season. Bury wood and it becomes soil that feeds your grandchildren. Or burn it in an afternoon and buy everything it would have given you for free. The technique works, the science proves it, the practitioners confirm it. The only question left is whether you will be one of the people who rebuilds what we abandoned, or one of the people who keeps burning what could have saved them. The mounds are waiting, the wood is free, and the next 100 years of your garden's life starts with what you choose to bury today.